All right. Good morning, everyone, or good afternoon. Thank you for joining us for the July version of the Eclipse Foundation quarterly members meeting. In attendance, my name is Paul White. I'm Vice President of Member Services. I'm actually joining you remotely. In the boardroom is Mike Milinkovich, our Executive Director, Wayne Beaton, heads up our projects and IP team, and Ian Scarrett, who's the lead of the marketing team. Can you skip to the next slide, Stephanie? We have a full agenda for you today. Mike is going to give us an update and also an update on the Eclipse Public License version 2.0. Wayne has actually some new details on what's going on with projects, and we recently did a brand survey of the foundation that Ian can fill you in with some details, and then towards the end I will give you some details on our current activities. So with that, I'll turn it over to Mike.
All right.
Oh, before I do that, one thing, Mike. Yeah, just one thing. If you have questions, please feel free to add them to the group chat along the side. So those of you who are joining us live, just type them in. We'll either answer them at the end of a section, or we'll do it at the end of the session, depending on the flow here. If you have questions, you're watching this after, so not live, but you're watching the stream later, feel free to leave questions in that chat box as well. We will monitor that chat box for the next 7 days or so. And if you do have questions, we will get back to you with answers on those. So please feel free to jump in and join us. So, sorry, Mike, you're all set.
All right, thank you very much. So to start the executive director's update. So first, an update on the members. So as of June 30th, we're at 265 members, including 10 strategic members. And one thing I'm particularly happy is we continue to see strong growth on the number of committers working on various Eclipse projects. So we're well over 1,400 committers. And I know with all the project proposals that we have coming, that number is going to continue to go up. So that's good to see. So just a little bit more detail on that. So total number of strategic members is 10. That's 9 strategic developer, 1 strategic consumer, being CA Technologies, 138 solutions members, and 117 associate members. So we continue to enjoy steady growth on the membership side. So I want to thank a few new members for joining. So on the solutions side, Contact Software, CMind, Morantex, PRFO, Tommy Tribe, and PTA GmbH have all joined as solutions members. So welcome to our community. On the associate member side, we have InterSystems Corporation and Universities of York, Oulu, and L'Aquila. And so welcome all to the Eclipse community. In terms of members who have joined working groups, we on the IoT side, SAP, Deutsche Bahn, Kichwa Coders, and Contact Software have all joined and started participating in the IoT working group. And on the Polarsys side, CMind and PRFC have also joined the Polarsys working group. So welcome to those various communities, and great to see continued growth in the working groups. So a quick financial update. So if we look at there's been quite a bit of changes since we did the budget last November. Basically, the revenue and expense numbers are both going to be significantly lower this year than what was originally planned. A large part of that is that the DevOps US conference ended up being a smaller event than we planned. And we do budget sort of gross revenue and expense for all of our budgets as part of that. So you can see that was a big difference on the revenue side. And also last year we had we had a couple of strategic members, being Google and OpenText, sort of in the second half of the year, dropped down to solutions members, which has reduced the membership revenue somewhat. Holding the line on the expenses side, so that we'll be coming in with the same budgeted net loss of around $500,000. We have a long tradition of forecasting these kinds of numbers and ultimately doing significantly better by the year end, and we will be doing our very best again this year to do that. So we continue to see good financial management at the Eclipse Foundation. Okay, the next topic I wanted to discuss, and this I've talked about at the last members meeting as well, but I wanted to go over the changes that are coming with the version 2 of the Eclipse public license. And we have, this is something that we've been working on for quite some time, and we're getting very close to the end of this process. And obviously the default license that we use for our projects is kind of like the social contract that underpins what is happening amongst our the technology projects at Eclipse. And so I think it's very important that everybody understand the changes that we're making and why we're making them. So just a brief history on EPL version 1. EPL was originally very, very close to the common public license, which was authored around 2001. So as a document, it's pretty much about 16 years old, which, in and of itself is, kind of the motivation for doing a new version, because a lot has happened in 16 years in terms of open source, understanding of open source and conventions and so on. So the Eclipse license itself was originally approved by the OSI in November of 2003. And the only changes to the CPL were two: scope of the patent termination, and the appointment of the Eclipse Foundation as the license steward, whereas in the CPL it was IBM. So that's the history. What are the goals for this revision? So first, broaden to include content, not just code and documentation, which was what was referenced in EPL version 1, files versus module, choice of law, general modernization, GPL compatibility, and miscellaneous cleanup, and we'll go through each one of these as we proceed. But it's also important to note what did not change. So we haven't changed the copyright license, the patent license, the patent termination, or the commercial distribution clauses. So those are stayed the same, and those are really the kinds of clauses that the lawyers like to really worry about if you start to change. And part of the reason why we didn't change those is, well, first of all, they have stood the test of time and are still continue to be sort of state of the art in terms of how to give patent and copyright licenses. And so we continue to see those clauses stay the same. And the second reason is that we really want to help make it easy for our member companies and the companies and people that are contributing to Eclipse projects to be motivated to change to this new license version. Who's been working on this? So the Eclipse IP Advisory Committee of the Board of Directors has been very involved, and then we've had a number of public discussions, and a number of prominent lawyers within the open source community have kindly contributed their time and their knowledge to this process. So I just want to say thanks very much to everybody that was involved. It's been a multi-year effort to get us to this point, and a lot of work by a lot of people. So first change, scope of contribution. So EPL v1 specifically referred to code and documentation, and in version 2 we're going to broaden that to refer to content. And the reason why we're doing this is that a lot of projects contain things which are not clearly either code or documentation, things like icons, GIFs, and documents which may or may not really be documentation in the original term. So it makes sense to make sure that they're all covered under the license. File versus module. So the EPL version 1 referred to module as the scope of the work that was covered under the EPL, and file is clearly the term of art that has won. It's clearer, it's more concrete, it's better understood, and it also ties to the developer certificate of origin, which the Eclipse Foundation started using last year when we moved to the Eclipse contributor agreement. And this is really just a one-word change in the definition of contribution. So it was a very, very simple change to make to the license itself. Choice of law. Eclipse is very well known in Europe. We have a lot of members in projects that are based in Europe. And something that we heard quite a bit over the years was that the references to New York State law was made the license somewhat less desirable for use within Europe. So we've changed that, we've removed the reference to New York State, and because we're removing the reference to a particular body of law, we've had to add a number of definitions to the license to make it clearer, because we can no longer rely on the definitions that are included in statute law. So the modified works and derivative works are the two of the definitions that we've had to add, and modified works is used to determine the scope of the copyleft, and derivative works is similar to the way the Apache license uses it, is defined pretty much the same way as the definition in U.S. statute law, and just make it a nice clear definition for derivative works. Scripting languages, we wanted to make sure that the EPL version 2 was applicable to scripting languages. So we've added definitions of source code, and we've simply made the scope of copyleft to be entirely based on making the source code available. So this is the reason why scripting languages are a little bit of an issue is that most open source licenses, and EPL version 1 included, makes a distinction between source code and executable code. And in the case of a language like JavaScript, the source code and the executable code are in fact one and the same. So that's why we had to tweak some of the language in order to make sure that we were able to support scripting languages. Source code available, we removed the requirement that source code for the program has to be available from the contributor, which is the distributor. So what this clause in EPL version 1 was doing was forcing companies who want to distribute EPL licensed code to copy the source code and maintain it on their own servers. We would actually prefer that they simply point to the repositories at Eclipse, the Eclipse Foundation, as saying this is where the source code is available. And I think that reducing extra copying of code is a good thing. There's some changes to notices. The requirement that you cannot remove certain notices. So I think that's just sort of falls into the category of general improvement. Yeah, so there's just some basic changes in there, largely around bringing it in line with common practices in the industry today. GPL compatibility is something which Eclipse is very much motivated to be a commercially friendly open source foundation, and including the ability to license software commercially that comes that's based on EPL licensed code. But there's been numerous cases where we've had projects request that they be dual licensed with the BSD in order to allow for GPL compatibility. So what we've done is we've taken the approach that that new projects at the Eclipse Foundation can say that they want to be GPL compatible, and use that as part of, by adding a notice file that's specified in the EPL version 2, and that will allow for GPL compatibility without losing the copyleft, which is inherent in the EPL. So this is something that we think is actually going to help inspire contributions back to new projects that are hosted at Eclipse. We basically copied the approach that was taken in the Mozilla Public License version 2, except we took it the sort of opposite, implemented it in the opposite way. MPL version 2 is GPL compatible by default, and we are not. So you have to add a specific notice if you want your project to be GPL compatible. And the group, the person or entity that makes this decision is the initial contributor. So this will be a decision that a new project will make when they're starting the new project. Just some miscellaneous changes. One of the things that I think that's particularly important is adding the, and to the extent permitted by applicable law. We've heard concerns from Europe over the years that our previous limitations of liability and warranty clauses would actually be null and void in jurisdictions like Germany. And so this is actually a change which certainly doesn't hurt in other jurisdictions, but which means it really strengthens the enforceability of the Eclipse Public License version 2 in places like Germany. So we're getting very close to the end of this process. We've referred this to the OSI for certification. We've also asked the Free Software Foundation for certification, but their process seems to be particularly opaque. So far, the OSI process has gone well, and they've really only found one minor typo that will change. So we're expecting that the OSI will be approving this new version of the license in the second week of August, and that will allow the board of the Eclipse Foundation to approve this in mid-August when they have their meeting on August 16th. So looking forward to doing this, and then there will be a large process, of course, to roll this out into our many projects. So stay tuned, and we'll be talking about how that will be working. Wayne and Stephanie and others are working on this plan for later this quarter and into Q4 of this year. And that's it for me. And so thank you very much for your attention, and I will pass the baton over to Wayne.
Great, thank you. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, as applies. Talk briefly about the IP policy changes that we've been rolling out over the last year. We've actually had a new IP policy revision in place for a little bit more than a year now, and the adoption of the so-called Type A dependency due diligence type for third-party content is picking up steam. I think we have 204 total Type A CQs, and these are basically license check only style due diligence. So if you see the chart that I'm showing here, it's certainly the case that the Type B, the more traditional, more thorough review Type B is still more popular. I'm actually really curious to see what this chart looks like over the next year or so as we start to stabilize and the Type A sort of due diligence becomes more normal to projects. As new projects are created, we are creating them as Type A. We're treating all their third-party content as Type A. The intent is that at some point in time, those projects may opt to instead employ the more rigorous, the more thorough Type B due diligence, and that's really up to the project team. We actually expect that a lot of projects, as they leave incubation, may opt to do this, or they may not. It's just as a matter of reinforcement. The Type A sort of due diligence that we do is actually more involved than what basically everybody else does anyway. It's still a very good, high quality sort of intellectual property due diligence. About a month ago, we finished our, well, I'm not sure, probably never going to be finished, but we decided upon a tool. We've been hunting for a tool that project teams can use to do their own Type A due diligence assertions without engaging the IP team. The idea is to kind of try and get these approvals done very quickly. We explored a tool called Fossology and determined that it is a fantastic tool in the hands of an IP analyst, but not generally something that was appropriate for use by project committers and developers, that sort of person, sort of skill set. So we looked a little bit harder, and we found this project called Scan Code Toolkit, which is on GitHub, completely open source, Apache license. Very easy to use. In fact, if you're curious about it, you can clone the repository and really just start using it. It self-configures. So we found this tool, and it does a great job. It generates a manifest of the content it reviews, matches for every file match. It gives a list of the licenses included in that file, provides a summary of the licenses found. It outputs content in HTML, JSON, all sorts of different formats. It's a very useful tool. And our observation is that its results are exactly what we're looking for. So about a month ago, I think we went live fully on June 28th. Webmaster implemented an update to our Eclipse Genie script, which automatically runs this tool. So as a committer, if you create a new contribution questionnaire for third-party content and designate it as type A, the Eclipse Genie will automatically kick in. It will grab the source code for that CQ, run it through the scan code tool, attach the results of that scan in HTML to the CQ, and then if through its scan it determines that there is exactly one license represented in the content and that one license is on our whitelist, it automatically approves. Pardon me, approve, we need to be careful. Approve means something specific to the IP team. It automatically license certifies the content, and the project team is notified that they are good to go. So theoretically, you can enter a type A CQ and have it processed and within a few minutes be given approval to use it. We think this is going to be a massive win for project teams. To this point, we've actually only had 13 CQs. It's a fairly slow period for us right now. Things tend to drop off this time of year. But we've had 13 type A CQs entered into the system, and 8 of them have matched. So that's about a 61% hit rate. Yeah, yay! We call this a little victory. Again, like the previous chart, I'm really curious to see what this looks like in a year. And I'm going to make this, I'm going to actually make a chart that keeps track of this because charts are awesome. But again, I'm curious to see in a year's time what this number is. You know, we were kind of hoping for an 80% hit rate, but 60% is still pretty awesome. Anyway, another thing that we've been working on is an update to the guide to the legal documentation. The problem that we're trying to solve is that our current guide is focused exclusively on projects that are building Eclipse platform plugins and features. And in order to conform to those guidelines are written around a lot of technical considerations. The way that the Eclipse platform, for example, displays license information is that it displays an about.html file. It's looking specifically for that file in a specific format. We look for the location of different files is described, again, in order to work well with the implementation in the Eclipse platform. Now, before I say anything else, if you are a project that is doing Eclipse platform plugins and features, we're not going to require that you change what you do. There will be a small addition that we're going to ask for, but we consider the current implementation, we're going to reconsider it as an implementation detail for projects doing work with that particular type of technology. In the more general documentation, we have looked to what other projects have been doing, what other open source projects, other open source foundations are doing, and our guidelines are to adopt specific standards that others are doing. Like, for example, in the root of a Git repository, we are going to start looking for a license file and a notice file. The license file is intended to be a plain text but human readable file, can be in a markup format like a markdown, containing the declared project licenses. Generally, this would be the Eclipse public license. The file names we're recommending specific file names. However, based on the technology used or limitations of the technology, different file names will be permitted. The idea is if we consistently name these files, then they're easy to find. But again, we just want the information more than anything. If there's limitations that prevent us from doing it in this way, then we'll deal with those. The notice file will use something, basically lists the copyright message information, license information, pointers back to the canonical Git repo for the project, pointer to the project information page, that sort of information. That notice file we're going to expect to be in an SPDX format, and we're going to provide lots of examples and templates and tools for specifying this information. This is something we're going to be rolling out over the next half year or so. So that's really been talking about Git repositories. We're also going to be looking for notice and license files in the distribution form. I've put a jar file example here, primarily because I think most of us understand jar files. In the meta-inf directory, we'll look for a notice and a license file, again for jar files. For different forms of distribution, then this would be really specific to the technology used. So an NPM archive will do what the traditional standard, or what the evolving standard, what the rest of the community does in that format. Where we kind of wind up with a gray area is distribution formats that are a single file, and we're going to be looking for minimal headers, recommendations for minimal headers in JavaScript files, for example, to at least point back to the project and give somebody looking at the content at least a fighting chance of figuring out the copyright license information. So more coming for this. We will be communicating this. The intent is to roll this out at the same time we roll out the EPL 2.0 changes that Mike was talking about. We want to try to avoid multiple hits. As project teams adopt one, they can adopt the other. I think that will lighten the burden on the projects. I want to just reiterate that other than asking project teams to put a license and notice file in their root of their Git repositories, we're not asking projects doing platform plugins and features to change the way they're doing anything. So we're not asking for wholesale changes for the sake of change. Just a brief note, I've mentioned SPDX on this call and on previous calls. This is a standard that's being adopted across the industry, and we want to adopt it as well. So we're going to do that where we can. The obvious easy thing to adopt is very standardized codes for different license types. I've shown a couple of examples: EPL 1.0, Apache 2.0. These codes are well defined. Tools that understand SPDX, of which there are many, Fossology and ScanCode being two of them, understand these codes and will identify these codes. The other probably more interesting or equally interesting part is there is a syntax for describing how licenses are combined. So projects that are dual licensed, for example, will use disjunction, an inclusive disjunction, EPL or Apache 2.0, for example. Conjunction, as shown in my second example there, means that both licenses must be accepted. So either a consumer can pick one license or another license, or they must accept one license and another license. So we're going to start pushing out consistent use of this. If you've been monitoring our use on IPzilla, you'll notice that we've started to specify licenses using this syntax in the license field there, and some other things. The SPDX also allows us to specify other things, other metadata licenses involved. So a project may be licensed EPL, but it may be distributing Apache licensed content. So the notice file in SPDX format can specify that kind of information like we do in an about file today. Again, copyright statements, lists of contributors, that sort of things. We are actively using some tools that do this. In fact, the ScanCode tool that we use to scan content for our automatic approvals can actually be run against project code and generate a notice file in the format that we're looking for. So those are some things that we will, again, be rolling out over the next little while. Just an example of where we might use the SPDX codes in a file header. We're going to start asking projects to do this. Again, we're not going to be asking projects to go through and modify this for the sake of modifying it. It's just more, I guess, new content as projects are developing new content and maybe some retroactive updates. We're going to be looking for an SPDX license identifier tag in the header. This, again, just makes it easier for SPDX aware software to automatically determine this information. Frankly, I'm a little disappointed that nobody has made any comments about my references to Acme University. Anyway, I've had that graphic up for some time and no one said a thing. I have to use an Animaniacs reference next time, I guess. Anyway, this would be a good time to contact Ian. Just as I wrap up here, I want to make people aware that there's a couple of services that they should, or a couple of things that they should be doing. If you care about the Eclipse IDE, there is the Eclipse Java IDE Twitter handle. Follow them, tell your friends. I'd really love to drive these numbers up. The other thing is that the Eclipse JDT project has been working very hard on Java 9 support. We need, again, if you care about Java development in the Eclipse IDE, if this is something that's a focus to you and your community, it would be very helpful to the JDT team if you could test this out. The Java 9 support is available in the Eclipse Marketplace. There are instructions for installing it there. There is also a wiki page, wiki.eclipse.org/Java9, which provides more information. Please, if you love Eclipse and Eclipse IDE and Eclipse IDE support for Java, please take some time to test this out. I'll wrap up with some other project announcements. We have a handful of new project proposals: the Eclipse Basis, Eclipse Picasso, Eclipse Big IoT under the Technology PMC, the Eclipse Dutil under IoT, and the Eclipse Acute. I hate to mention any of these specifically without talking about all of them, but the Eclipse Acute one is kind of interesting. It's some language server implementations of C# support in the Eclipse IDE. And there's another language too, but I can't remember quite which one it is. There's a handful of recent releases, including the Papyrus for Real-Time, which did their 1.0. They've actually graduated with that release. That's a big deal. Congratulations to the Eclipse Papyrus for Real-Time project. The Eclipse Micro Profile project has actually decided to do sort of a sub-project, sorry, I guess component releases. This is actually something that's been supported by the Eclipse development process for a little while. A project can actually release some subset of their functionality. Eclipse Micro Profile has decided to do that, so they have their config 1.0 functionality as an independent release with the rest of the project. And the Micro Profile itself, 1.1, Stephanie, did that actually release already? It did, okay. So that is the entire Micro Profile project as it exists. Eclipse Leo, Eclipse Linux tools, and the App4MC project have all done releases as well. So with that, I'm passing the baton to Ian. If you have any questions, please don't hesitate to ask on this channel, or emo@eclipse.org is another great way to connect with us.
Great, thank you, Wayne.
We're talking to the microphone over there.
Okay. So welcome everyone. What I want to do is take you through the results of a survey, a brand perception survey that we ran earlier this year. And we came up with some kind of interesting results. So so basically what we did was from kind of March to April, put out a survey to really test what is the how do people view Eclipse, kind of the Eclipse brand. And it was actually Matthias Zimmerman's kind of initial idea. So he really spearheaded the project with BSI. And so what we did is kind of used our online channels, kind of social media, the website, but also went out and surveyed at 3 events, so DevOps US, JavaLand, and DevOps France. So we got a really nice mixture of different communities coming into the survey. And so we actually broke down those. So the JavaLand was actually was BSI doing it from their booth. So it had very little to do with kind of Eclipse from people coming in. So the Eclipse community, kind of our channels, and then the adverts kind of cut the data in that way. We also actually asked we used to do an industry survey around what developers are using around Eclipse. And in 2010, we actually asked a brand perception question. So we actually had some comparison data to report on. So just kind of quickly in demographics, it was very European centric, which is quite frankly very typical of many surveys you see out there. Europeans seem to like answering these types of surveys. Kind of the roles was very technical oriented, no surprise there. Company sizes, this is pretty typical of what we get, where lots of small, medium businesses, but about a quarter are large enterprises. Years of experience for how kind of been using Eclipse technology. Not hugely surprising, and kind of 6+ years, because Eclipse has been around for a long time. People have been using it for a long time. Kind of, we asked whether people are foundation members or not. So I think this is pretty significant. Kind of most of the respondents are not foundation members. So we actually started the survey with just questions about just open source foundations in general. And so kind of test kind of what do people think about foundations. So the first question we asked were kind of, are you active in open source communities? And not terribly surprising, but kind of most people are active, whether they're active users or kind of casually using technology. Fewer people are kind of active as committers and developers, which kind of makes sense. And I still find it amazing that 9% of the respondents said they don't participate in open source. Like, what do they do, right? But anyways, if we look at kind of the people from Java land, so kind of how we define Java, the Java community, kind of the number of active users goes up, the number of people that do not participate in open source definitely goes up. So then we asked kind of the importance of foundations. So kind of just as a kind of reminder, this is before we even talked about Eclipse at all, right? So so most people think of foundations as being important or neutral. I think kind of the neutral is whatever, right? But 38% I think is pretty good in terms of people seeing foundations as being important. It certainly can be better. And certainly the split there where within the Java community where kind of people aren't doing participating in open source, kind of their knowledge of open source is significantly lower. That's where the kind of foundations, the importance of foundation really goes down. Then we ask kind of, so this was completely unaided, right? We just said, what open source foundations do you think are the most important, right? And so as a write-in, and if you look at kind of the aggregate results, Apache was number one, Eclipse, and then the Linux Foundation. If you cut the data with just the Java community, so the Java land respondents, where Apache continues to be up there. Within the Eclipse community, we're basically on par with Apache. So I think kind of the takeaway here is certainly Apache does very well in terms of top of mind recall of open source foundations. Not terribly surprising. We do very well within the Eclipse community. So I think kind of some interesting data points there. If we ask them with a list of questions, a list of foundations. So on this chart, this is the list of foundations we kind of put out there. The interesting thing here is that so added into the mix of kind of the top three being Apache, Eclipse, and Linux. The other ones, kind of what we're asking there is kind of 1, 0, plus minus 1, kind of important or not, right? And there's just a lot of ambiguity or ambivalence to these other foundations. And I don't want to read too much into it, but I just thought it was kind of interesting with this respondent pool where kind of Apache, Linux Foundation, Free Software, and Eclipse definitely are relevant, right? But these other foundations, which are very important in the industry, really didn't show up as being overly important to people. So kind of interesting data point. We asked kind of what are the benefits of the foundation, and so I'm not going to go into a lot of detail there, but kind of some data there, and then we go into the perception of the community, and so this is kind of the brand perception question, right? So we ask what statement best reflects your perception of Eclipse. So we don't define Eclipse, right? This is kind of, it was just a question with these 5 options. As you can see, so the 2010, we asked a very similar question. So in 2017, kind of where, frankly, we at the foundation are trying to make Eclipse be this community of open source projects and working groups. Kind of 22, kind of almost a quarter of the people kind of see that as their perception of Eclipse. So Frank, that's good news, right? And that's an increase from the 13 from 2010. I would have loved to have seen a lot more, but it's progress in the right directions. So I think overall, what we're trying to do is make Eclipse more than a Java IDE in terms of perception, and we still have a long ways to go on that. But we're starting, right? So then we can kind of cut through some of the data. I'm going to kind of skip over some of this just in terms of time for it, but the full report is available that people can go through, and I'd be happy to share data with people too. One interesting thing is that kind of if you cut the data by members versus non-members, our members definitely get it, right? So it definitely jumps up, right? So I think within our membership, we're getting the message out, which is good news. You certainly expect that, and we still got a long ways to go in the non-member community. The other thing interesting was that from a role perspective, with the C-levels and managers, they've got a better understanding. So I thought that was kind of interesting that there's a big difference there. Location did not matter. Kind of we were wondering about that, and we couldn't see any huge difference between Europe and North America. So then we asked kind of what are the values of kind of provided by the foundation. So I still don't quite understand why EPL is the top one. Yeah, it just, to me, sometimes these surveys, they kind of, some of the results you just shake your head and kind of, maybe it's just the way the question was. I don't know. But vendor neutrality, community development, it's what I would expect to be kind of close to the top. So it's good to see. We asked kind of your knowledge of Eclipse technology to really just see where we are with the diversity of our technology portfolio. Not terribly surprising. To me, this is more of a baseline. So we want to do this on an annual basis. And so this is kind of the starting point. So over time, I'd like to see kind of these other technology portfolios increasing in kind of awareness, right, and knowledge, right? So just kind of the starting point. Now, kind of as Mike pointed out to me, that kind of the scale of this slide of kind of awareness of the working group has changed substantially. So kind of this previous slide was scale is 0 to 5 or 0 to 4.5, but kind of the weighting was 1 to 5. Here, unfortunately, flipped the scale to 0 to 2, but the answer was still on a 1 to 5 scale or 0 to 5 scale. So so just keep that in mind. And so just kind of, this is a starting point for a baseline for trends for the working groups. That's it. So yeah, so it's something we want to look at doing on an annual basis. So we can start measuring kind of the success of the working groups, success of our kind of reinforcing that Eclipse is a community of projects and working groups. And I'm hoping that we can report on this on an annual basis. I'm done.
All right, thanks, Ian. And I guess hand this back over to Paul.
Great, thanks, Mike. So I am going to see if I can share my screen here. I'm going to share my screen. Can you see the slides there, folks? Yep. Great. All right. Before I start this, I want to apologize. I introduced everyone except for Stephanie. Let me fix that now. Stephanie Swart is also joining us. She's moderating this for us, which is fantastic. Stephanie's part of the projects team. So my apologies to you, Stephanie. It was just an oversight on my part. So.
All right. Thanks.
All right. Okay. So just a quick update on our conferences and activities. We just ran EclipseCon France. This was our 4th offering of EclipseCon France, if I'm not mistaken, in the last week of June. The event was fantastic. It was well attended. The feedback on the program was really, really strong. The diversity of the talks seemed to be well received by all who were in attendance. The unconference was very well attended. We did have a few challenges in terms of the mainly caused by the beautiful weather in Toulouse, or I'm saying beautiful, it was hot. And so as a result, the location that we were using for the unconference was definitely warm for everybody who was involved. But beyond that, everything about the EclipseCon event in France went very, very well. We have set the dates for next year. It's June 13, 14, again in Toulouse, again at the same conference center. We will use a different facility for the unconference, but certainly for the main conference, we're all queued up. Put this on your calendar. I can't say enough about how pleasant the experience is in Toulouse, so it's something that we encourage everybody to join us at. Quick note about the upcoming event in India. So the Eclipse Summit India 2017, this is the 2nd year in a row that we've run this at the end of July. This year it's a one-day event on July 29, being held again in Bangalore. The local team has put a lot of work into this program, and again, it looks like a very strong lineup of talks for people who will attend. The final event that I want to draw attention to is EclipseCon Europe, which is scheduled this year for October 24 through 26. It will be held again in Ludwigsburg at the Forum. We've been here now for well over 10 years. I guess it's 12 or 13 years we're going on. The feedback that we receive from both about the location and the event continue to be strong. In fact, last year, I think the survey results from those who attended were amongst the highest, if not the highest, that we've ever received. So, and we expect this to be a great event again this year. The program just recently, the call for papers just recently closed, so earlier this week, and we actually had a record number of submissions, which is fantastic. And the program committee is now working on those. We should have the program announced in the next 2 weeks. We also have a great lineup of keynote speakers that we'll be putting on the website in the next week or two. So check the eclipsecon.org website to find out details about it. I say I don't have it on this slide, but it's eclipsecon.org, and that will take you directly to the site. The week is actually full, and each year we seem to be adding more and more events to it. So the IoT activities there will grow. We'll have the IoT theme day, followed by a hack day and an IoT playground. So those 3 things together mean that the IoT community will be very, very active at EclipseCon. Project Quality Day is also another event that is well received. We've done this now for a few years. So those who participated in it always find that to be a great activity. The unconference day is getting full, if not completely full, in terms of space. If you were looking to organize something on the Monday, please reach out to us as quick as possible. You can send it to me at paul.white@eclipsefoundation.org, or click on the events.eclipse.org website, and you can find out information about how to organize something. But check out the activities around it. There's also many networking events and BOFs. So the BOFs are always well attended on the Tuesday night. On the Wednesday, we will have the EclipseCon band playing yet again this year, which is always a highlight of the conference. One thing that we added last year, and we will do it again this year, is we will have the next quarterly members meeting. So this meeting that we're holding right now, we will do as a face-to-face meeting. We will hold it on a Tuesday morning at 10:30. So please, by all means, if you're in Ludwigsburg, please plan on attending that meeting. We'd be pleased to to have you there and ask your questions face to face. So. So those are a few of the things that are on the go. As I say, refer to the events. I've just flipped back to the events.eclipse.org. That's where we post all of the events and activities that we have happening. And that constantly gets updated. So that's the update from me. So Stephanie, are there questions that have been come in along from the chat?
No, mostly just nice comments. No questions though.
Okay. All right. Well, if you do have, thank you, everyone. That it brings us to the end of our agenda for today. If you do have questions, feel free to come back and add them to the chat channel here. As I say, we will monitor this channel for the next week or so. And if you do have questions, we will get back to you with the answers just as quick as we can. So thanks for listening. Thanks to everyone who's presented here as well. And with that, we'll call it a day.
Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.